Welcome back to the Beyond the Wire podcast. I am your host, Tim Keller. Along with me, as he always is Mr. Matt Disher. How we doing today, Mr. Matt?
The long weekend is over. I had to rebuild a closet all weekend. My wife had too many clothes that collapsed the closet. And now I told her this for 5 years. I said, hey, you've got to get rid of some of the stuff. There's too much stuff in here. And she didn't listen to me.
Structural integrity is being compromised.
It was builder grade closet. They put when the builders built the house 10 years ago, they put in the closet, and it's done a pretty good job holding up all of the junk she had on these shelves. But it came crashing down last week. So we spent 2 days in the closet trying to figure this out. Otherwise, I spent a lot of time fishing with my son. I took my son fishing over the weekend, caught 22 fish in about 2 hours. And now that's all he wants to do. I'm like, when I was a kid and we went fishing, I couldn't catch anything. I could never catch
fish.
Yeah, that was amazing. And we'd go to paid lakes where they were supposed to be stocked, and I'm 99% sure that these other lakes where we went didn't have fish in them. So it was a decent weekend. I got to ride some of the new roller coasters at Kings Island here at Cincinnati. One is called Orion. It's the 8th tallest roller coaster in the world.
Wow!
So that was pretty terrifying. But then after it was done, I said, "Let's do it again."
There you go.
So
there you go.
So we're back to the grind this week, but the weekend was good. I hope everybody else enjoyed their respective weekends, whatever you were celebrating. I saw something from a few of my fellow veteran posters on LinkedIn, social media, and things like that were saying that they don't mourn the loss of our fallen; they celebrate their lives. And so I've taken on, in previous years, I've taken on a little bit different thinking around Memorial Day, that it should be a day, it should be a weekend to be used to celebrate these people and don't feel guilty about it. So we had fun this weekend. We had fun in their honor, and asked my son a couple times if he understands the meaning of the weekend, and he does. He fully understands it. I took him to Arlington a few weeks ago, Arlington National Cemetery. Really gets it. He understood it. 10 years old. So we're on the right track. Good things are happening.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is
what
awesome.
About you?
Yeah, I saw an article was it this morning or the other day, kind of talking about that. Should Memorial Day be more of a celebration or more of a solemn day? And the article posts, both sides. And really, I think the article came down to at the end of the day, these people most likely would like to see their countrymen, their friends, their families be out there and enjoying these days and celebrating their lives and not just constantly mourning. So completely agree with you there. If you're in the Northeast like I am, Saturday, Sunday, rainy, really cold actually. I mean, we went from midweek last week, Tuesday, Wednesday last week of high 80s, low 90s and humidity, to Saturday and Sunday we're in the 40s with rain. It's a pretty drastic change. It was pretty daggone cold. I had to break out the hoodies again. I thought I was back in fall. But Monday turned out great. A little chilly in the morning. By mid-afternoon, that sun was up. Felt like Memorial Day finally. Started setting the pull up for the kids. Had dug the hole the weekend before, so got that all started. Now we got to get the thing filled up, because every day the kids are like, so when can we get in? When can we get in? When can we get, there's not water in it yet, so we got to do that first, and then you got to
get in.
Good luck splashing around, because
right.
But overall, it was a really good weekend. It was definitely nice to have that extra day away from work. Much needed right now for the majority of us that have stayed around in the workforce over this past year and a half now.
Right.
Those days don't seem to come around enough, that those freebies. So it's good to get one every once in a while. But it was a good weekend. The in-laws came over, had some really good food on the grill. Ate probably one too many burgers, but
there's no such thing.
I had 2 burgers, 2 dogs, so I probably could just settle for 1 burger, 2 dogs. That'd be fun.
Well, you were angst eating because it was so cold out. That's what I would have done. Because it was 55 degrees here too on Saturday. Weekend is too cold. I'm gonna go eat 3 hamburgers. Stupid. That's what I would have done.
That makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
But I hope everybody out there had a fantastic Memorial Day. I hope you got to spend it with some people you care about, be that friends, be that family, whoever. But we're past that now. We're moving on. I guess the 4th of July is the next big one coming. Looking forward to that, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just Matt and I this week, so we had some things we wanted to talk about. There's the shortages going around. We do, as a podcast, focus on the transition from military back to civilian life. So we wanted to go over some of those, like the skill translator, like what you've done in the military. How does that translate to the civilian workforce? But as we always do, we like to get in some news. And so the first one here, and Matt and I were both kind of talking a little bit before the show, and I just happened to have it pulled up as he was talking about it. But U.S. paratroopers accidentally attack civilian occupied building in Europe. So the 173rd Airborne Brigade accidentally seized a civilian occupied business in Bulgaria during a training exercise. So these individuals are jumping out of the planes. They're parachuting down onto this airstrip in Bulgaria, and there's some hangars and some bunkers and some buildings on this airstrip that they are to practice, taking over and sweeping these buildings and ensuring they are secure. Well, there happens to be an engineering building right beside the airfield that was mistakenly taken as a building that needed to be swept in this training exercise. So these paratroopers entered this engineering building full of Bulgarian citizens and swept the building. Now, they did have blanks, but you can't see inside the magazines. So you have an engineer who's in this building doing his 9 to 5, and in comes this American troop, full gear, body armor, weapon, slung around the shoulder. You see a magazine. You have no clue that there's blanks in there. And I'm sure he's screaming, get down, or something to that effect. I would imagine this is an extremely scary situation for these Bulgarian citizens. So obviously, sorry, whoops. There is, if you go to military.com and find this article, there actually is a link to a YouTube video here from inside this engineering building. I have not played the video yet, but you can see that there are a couple soldiers here sweeping the building. Personally, just from this screenshot, I'd say these guys need to work on their spacing. One little grenade's going to take out a couple of them. But hey, tight quarters inside those buildings when you're trying to, clear out buildings and such like that. But, it's a pretty big whoopsie.
The fun part about this is if you watch the video, there is at one point in time. So the soldiers are kind of like leisurely walking into the building. Like 3 of them enter the building at a time. One of them is standing in what we used to call the fatal funnel, or we still call the fatal funnel, which is like basically you're standing in the biggest doorway, walking into the building, which is a huge no-no. And then there's a bunch of soldiers outside, and they're kind of leisurely walking around. But at one point when you're watching the video, you see some of these armed soldiers. These are guys that look like they would have just dropped in, out of the air, so to speak, onto an airfield, which is really what the point of this is, taking over an airfield, taking over the adjacent buildings. So they're walking into the building, and then you see this random dude sitting there in the building watching these guys walk past. Now you can imagine what this random dude is thinking to himself. Like, here comes these soldiers. You got some guys in the back who are probably talking like they're conspiracy theorists. Like, see, I told you this was going to happen one day.
They're coming for us. I knew it.
But there's this one guy just calmly sitting there, like having a smoke, while these soldiers are like, now fortunately, they didn't come in like blowing any doors down or kicking any doors open. So they just kind of walked into a big open garage door and walked into the building. But I just think it's funny when you're watching it. It's kind of humorous. There's this one guy sitting there just kind of watching them walk in. And I imagine, because we used to call the bad guys in training operations like this, were called the OP4, the opposing forces or the opposition forces. They're like, man, these OP4 guys are usually other soldiers. Wow, this OP4 guy is like 80 years old and just sitting there smoking a cigarette. Man, they really made this realistic.
Yeah. Well, you're jumping out of a plane. You probably get twisted up coming down. Left turns to right, right turns to left, up is down, and down is up. So, once they hit the ground, I'm sure they went over, a layout of the land. They had an idea of what they wanted to do. You land, you you're ready to go. You see this building and this door's wide open. You're like, hey, there's one. Let's go get this one. It just happened to be the wrong one. So the Army officials say, we sincerely apologize to the business and its employees. We always learn from these exercises and fully investigating the cause of the mistake. The U.S. Army Europe said in a statement, we will implement rigorous procedures to clearly define our training areas and prevent this type of incident in the future. Yeah, I mean, if you're doing a training exercise that is that close in proximity to a civilian possessed building, you should probably make it very, very 1,000% clear that this building is in no way, shape, or form part of this training exercise. Because I highly doubt anything tragic would have happened, but you have that Alex Jones listener in the back, and he sees a troop come through the door, and he decides he's going to, this is my time to shine.
I'm going to fight back.
Yeah. He gets put on the ground quickly with some extra force behind it by somebody. Yeah, that's not going to be a very good look. So,
well, I mean, imagine if this happened in any country where people can be armed. So, think about that. Same guy, conspiracy theorist. I knew it. This is the day. He starts shooting at him. And these guys they're using blanks, so maybe they shoot some blanks back and then retreat. But fortunately, nobody got hurt. I mean, you talk about, and this is a training exercise, we talk about in combat in general. If you've ever watched, for the everyday person who's ever seen Saving Private Ryan, it's a great example. When they land on the beach, I know it's a different circumstance here, but when they land on the beach, there is some discussion for a few minutes about how confusing the location is. They don't know where they are. And I've had people ask me, like, how do you not know where you are with GPS and maps? Like, nobody's stopping to, if you're in the heat of battle, for example, or in this case, if you're trying to take over an airfield and you're trying to make the training as realistic as you can, you probably had a time limit for which to conquer your objectives. And so you're not like, is this building on or off limits? And you're looking at maps and you're looking at GPS and you have no idea. It's an adjacent building. Go into it. They told me to be here. And you've got probably some young lieutenant, and I'm going to pick on the lieutenants here again. They don't know how to use maps and land nav. So they're lost. And the sergeant, I imagine the sergeant's in the back, like, sir, this building's off limits.
Yeah.
Come on,
we're
sergeant.
going the wrong way. And he's like, Sergeant, you don't question me.
Right.
The bar? Like, okay.
Right. And now in the debrief, I just envision in the debrief right now, there's some sergeant sitting there talking to a lieutenant colonel. Sir, I did inform Lieutenant Stevenson that we were not supposed to go into that building, and he didn't listen to me. Yeah. And so, nobody got hurt. Honest mistake. I think we walked through when we were doing amphibious raid training in Southern California. Not that we invaded a building or weren't supposed to be there, but if you're familiar with Camp Pendleton, Interstate 5 goes right through it on the coast, and there's a rest stop somewhere in that property. Well, we were doing amphibious raids in the middle of the night on Red Beach, which is right there. And we'd come up on the beach on Zodiac boats, and we would walk 6, 8, 10 miles inland and go hit an objective and come back out. Well, we walked right through, or almost right through, the rest stop one time. We were all painted up, middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, probably 3 o'clock in the morning, faces painted. We were sneaking through this rest stop, like walking past cars, and nobody saw us. That was about as close as I ever got to being involved in a civilian property or a civilian building during a training exercise. But nobody saw us. Now, could you imagine if you saw a company of Marines roll in through a rest stop with weapons out? And we were armed. I mean, we had live ammunition and stuff like that. Conspiracy theorist jumps out of his truck like, I knew it. They're invading Southern California.
Yeah. It's Russians.
You get it, and then instantly they are met with overwhelming firepower.
Yeah, I was gonna say I met a young man who was training to be a SEAL while we were out there in Pendleton, and they do some of the SEAL training down in San Diego, down on Coronado Island, and if anyone's ever been down there, there's a very famous old Hotel del Coronado. Had Valentine's dinner there once, extremely expensive, but very good. But it's a beautiful hotel on a beachfront piece of property out on this island. These guys said very similar to what Matt just brought up. They're out there doing Zodiac. We're running up on the beach. We're going to be as quiet as possible. We're going to hop off the boat, wade our way in and pop up out of the water at the last second and surprise everybody. Well, they didn't, I guess, plot their course properly. So they ended up popping up right out in front of Hotel Del Coronado as people are sitting outside having their dinner. They were doing, dusk training just as it's turning from light to dark. It's when vision's the worst. So if you're going to try to ambush somebody, doing it at dawn or dusk as the light's changing and your eyes are still attempting to figure things out themselves, it's probably the best 2 times to do it during the day. So they were practicing these during those times, and they probably scared a few people that were having dinner. So, he obviously was not in charge. He was a very young Navy member, so I'm sure somebody up the chain got reamed out for that one. But yeah, you got to be careful with that sort of stuff.
I've stayed at that hotel before, and if you are unaware that the Navy SEALs are training nearby, then you are acutely oblivious, because it's literally, you can wake up and look out of if you have a bay facing or a beach facing room, you can look out of your patio. You can see these guys running up and down the beach, coming in and out of the water. And there's helicopters and boats flying around out there in the water and stuff like that. So you know that they're there, and it probably would not be surprising if you were standing out there on the beach. I think they try to stay to their little section, which is, if you're looking out to the water, it's just to the right of the hotel. But I would envision, every once in a while they probably have to.
The current pushed them a little further north than they probably wanted to be, and they ended up right in front of the hotel, and people are like,
and frankly, who doesn't like that kind of stuff? I mean, that's the other thing, is that people like to see that stuff. This is stuff that you only see in the movies in many cases. Like, who wouldn't want to see a SEAL team roll up on the beach and you're like, oh, look at these guys. I don't get to see these. You don't get to see that every day.
I told him I would have walked up to the table and grabbed somebody's champagne glass. I'm like, hey, cheers. Shot it back quick and rolled on. But never know. Something else we wanted to talk about was these shortages. Right now the U.S. economy is dealing with shortages in multiple areas. We see the price of lumber has skyrocketed because supposedly there's a lumber shortage. There's a shortage on vehicles. As of yesterday, I was seeing and reading articles about a potential meat shortage coming. There was the big scare with the fuel a couple weeks ago. There was the cyber attack. What was that company? It was the Russian-based cyber criminal gang called DarkSide. They planted some ransomware inside the computers of the Colonial Pipelines network, and the pipeline decided to shut down the pipeline for a period of time to attempt to not allow this ransomware to travel through their entire computer network. So that caused a scare that there was going to be a fuel shortage. So at least for about a week, you saw people up and down the East Coast and in the South doing some, in my opinion, pretty stupid things. Putting gasoline in,
plastic bags.
Totes and plastic bags and, Gatorade bottles. People are filling up Gatorade bottles at the pumps. Like, just relax. To the point where it just so happened I had used the last of my fuel in my gas can for my lawn tractor about 2 weeks ago, so I can get about 2.5 mows of my lawn on a tank of gas in my lawn tractor. So I was coming up on needing some fuel, and I'm like, man, if this gets that bad, I'm gonna have to go to the gas station with my gas can, and I'm gonna look like that jackass,
right?
Who's I need to get every drop I can.
Yeah.
I'm filling this up so I can go home and use it right now. I'm not hoarding fuel or gasoline in any sort of way. It didn't get that bad here.
I had the same thought, because same thing. I recently got a new riding lawnmower and I'm cutting my grass. I'm like, I'm going to have to get some gas. Now, here in Ohio, we didn't experience any of that. There was no shortage here. Nothing shut down. I don't think that pipeline runs through here or supplies us or something. The prices didn't go skyrocketing.
Yeah, it goes from Texas to Louisiana up the eastern seaboard.
Right. So we weren't necessarily affected by this. Now, had it been shut down for a while, we could have been affected. But I didn't see anybody acting crazy around here. However, you see it on the media, and this is the same way that the toilet paper shortage happened at the beginning of COVID. The idea was that in the case of the toilet paper takes up so much space on the shelves that when somebody goes in and buys and stocks up for a week or 2 or 3, anticipating that they're going to be inside of their house, if you get 1 or 2 boxes of toilet paper or 1 extra box of toilet paper, the shelves look empty. Then people take to social media and go, oh my gosh, the shelves are empty. Mm-hmm. Then everybody goes in and rushes in and buys it. The same thing was happening with gas. Oh no, we can't get gas. Let's go fill up our plastic tubs, storage tubs, and garbage bags and ridiculous. I think some people started to make fun of it, like taking laundry baskets with holes in them and showing people trying to like put gas in it at the gas station, because it just became silly. But same thing. I'm like, I have to go get 2 gallons of gas in my big red gas can.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be the guy who looks like I am, I've got a couple more in the back. I'm going to fill up my laundry basket too.
I saw a photo of someone actually doing that thing. They're at the gas station with their, their little 2.5 gallon gas can. And he has a sign, like a kick me sign on his back, but it says, I swear it's for my lawnmower.
Right.
And I was like, I might have to be that guy.
Yeah.
Like, I swear to God, it's one can. You can see it's definitely getting used. Right. This is going to go to my house in my lawn tractor, and in another couple of weeks, I'll be back again to fill this thing back up. But yeah. But along those same lines, JBS USA is a major beef and pork producer. Suffered a cyber attack last weekend.
I froze or Tim froze.
Do you hear me, Matt?
Something strange happened here, so we'll keep going with this. So the idea here is that we got you back, Tim. I think you froze for a second. Oh, you froze or I froze?
I was going to say I could hear you the entire time.
That's weird.
So,
we lost each other. There you go. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was leading into the fact that JBS USA, a major beef and pork producer, recently suffered a cyber attack this past weekend, prompting reported shutdowns at the company plants in North America and Australia. They also believe this was a Russia-based criminal organization. Not saying it's the same one, but it seems, based off the last article about the pipeline, that this group of individuals is targeting companies for whatever reason, and they've also developed malware and spyware that they're selling to other cyber attack organizations. So just to let everybody out there know, there's a potential meat shortage on the horizon coming up. So so far, some authorities and trade groups have assured that operations will be back as normal as soon as possible, and trying to lessen the concerns about any major disruptions. But the experts do warn that this all depends on how quickly the issue is taken care of. So
this is one of those topics that I have been trying to get real solid answers on. And I feel like the media is lacking, in some cases, some solid information. And I say the media in general. When you go out and search for this, or why is there a chip shortage for cars? Mm-hmm. Why is there a meat shortage? What happened with the gasoline? Now the gasoline, the pipeline, we could see, obviously the thing got hacked and there was some information behind that. But I've had some speculative answers when I go out searching for this. And some of the things that I hear are that around the chip shortage, for example. Chip shortage is because everybody stayed at home last year. People bought computers, people bought televisions, they bought technology that they otherwise wouldn't have purchased. The other thing is that they bought cars. Apparently, during the shutdown, everybody went out and bought cars. Like 2020 was the best year for car sales in a long time. Mm-hmm. And so the answer has been, some of the official answers have been that because some of the plants shut down for a period of time due to COVID, but also people were buying more. Here we are now with a bit of a shortage that we're trying to play catch up. I don't know if that really answers the question. I think part of the other answers that I've seen are that at least here in the United States, for some shortages, there's the idea that people are being paid now not to come to work. I don't know if that's a real thing. I'm seeing this from, again, speculative sources, people that I read and follow. They're talking about, hey, if you were getting paid $8, $9, $10 an hour to go to work, and now suddenly you're being paid to stay at home during unemployment or some other sort of stimulus, then it doesn't make sense to go back to work. So I'm sure that's happening in some cases too. But I think overall, the shortage for chips in cars and things like that is supply and demand. We live in, if you know anything about lean or the Six Sigma or all of that just-in-time manufacturing, and I know I'm botching the way that it is, but it is that if your supply meets your demand just in time. You're not sitting on warehouses full of chips. You're not building cars, for example, that are going to sit in a parking lot for 8 months or a year and not be sold. So they're trying to build stock to put on shelves that essentially people can buy within the next month or two, instead of building stock to put on shelves. If you think about computer technology and TVs, every 3 months these things evolve. Then the one that you got a year ago is now out of date. I got a new TV for Christmas. It's probably now the old TV on the shelves. So you don't want to create, you don't want to buy, you don't want to build and manufacture all this stuff if people aren't going to be using it right away. So that's, I don't know. Again, I've read a couple of different stories on this, but that's what they explained to me. Just-in-time manufacturing, an overloaded supply chain. Some things got held up in ports, but ultimately everybody went out and bought something new last year, and it required all these semiconductor chips, for example. Lumber is the other one that I don't know, Tim, I don't know if you have any idea why lumber is so expensive. I saw a guy at a restaurant the other day, parked his pickup truck in the parking lot, ran in to get some food, and had a couple of sheets of plywood sitting in the back of his truck. And for a second, the 16-year-old criminal in me was like, I could take this and sell it on the black market and, and go buy a new car with it. Because they're talking like this stuff is 3 times the price now. But I almost want to joke around with the guy. It's like leaving bars of gold in the back of your pickup truck for anybody to take.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I don't understand why is lumber so expensive?
My father-in-law was trying to shed some light on this to me. Essentially, they're saying that there's a lumber shortage. I don't see it personally. I could understand that maybe over this past year and a half that with individuals not working nearly as much, that the lumber production industry had gone down. But I see, traditional lumber yards with plenty of actual lumber sitting in the yards waiting to be sold. So I don't see the shortage itself. Maybe their suppliers down the pipeline are saying, hey, we're going to run out here with, in the next 6 months. I don't know. But I'm also seeing, residential construction. It's still going on near me. Development a couple miles down the road here. I can imagine trying to pay to have a house built right now, because of the cost of these products, unless you got prices locked in 10 months ago.
Yeah.
The cost to build that home has doubled at least right now.
Right.
And it's going to go down the line. If the lumber goes up, then, the drywall is going to go up, and your electrical wiring is going to go up, and the roofing and the shingles, the siding, all of it. It's all going to go up. It's just going to become crazy, crazy expensive. I completely agree with you on the chips for the technology, things like that, and a little more shed a little more light onto what you were talking about, the lean process, essentially, and someone along the lines figured this out that at the end of the year, whatever stock we have on our shelves, we have to pay taxes on. It might not have moved and brought us profit yet, but it's expected profit, so we have to pay that tax. So somewhere down the line, someone said, well, why do we have all this on the shelves? Well, we've made it and we will eventually sell it. Okay, but why have we made it if we're not selling it right now? So they created processes like the lean process, and okay, we have an order for 2 million widgets. We're going to make 2.1 million widgets. Just over that order number to account for any defects or, missing shipments, things of that nature. So they're making, based off of their scoring of defects and things of that nature, they're going to make just enough to fulfill those orders, get them out the door on time, hopefully deliver them without no problem, and move on to the next order. They're not looking to, our expected order quantity for this for this month is going to be 10 million widgets. Let's make 20 million. That does them no good. Right. Then they're them paying, some warehousing per square foot to store these 10 million widgets of overage every month. So it's just a cost savings. They figured out this process in order to make just enough to account for the order, plus just a little bit extra to cover any issues that they might have and get those orders out the door. But
I remember this conversation coming up in the last recession. There was some talk around the auto manufacturers, some of the bailouts that happened around the auto manufacturers. And one of the conversations was that the production plants were talking to each other. So the place where they built the engines or the place where they built the transmissions were not talking to the place that was building the body or the body parts. And basically what was happening was at the end of the year, there were 50,000 extra engines sitting around with no bodies to put them in.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
this was, what's an engine cost in mass production? Let's call it $1. Well, that's $50,000 now that are sitting. And I realize that there are a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But expand upon that, make that number exponential. Let's assume that an engine is $5,000 and there's 50,000 of them sitting around. Yeah, you're paying taxes on that. That's lost revenue. That's money that in production, you just paid a bunch of people to build these. You paid these people $30 an hour to build these engines, and now the engines aren't being used or can't be used.
Yeah, you've paid for the manufacturing. You've now have to pay the tax, and you've not been able to see any profit off of that product. So yeah, it's a net loss essentially.
Right. My fear with all of this is that what's happening right now is obviously inflation. All the prices are going way up. So everything now, if you want to redo your deck, it's going to be 3 times the price. And you mentioned, Tim, houses are still being built. I know around here, some of the builders have stopped taking orders, at least for the time being, partially because although some people are still willing to pay, they're also unsure that they're going to be able to supply the right materials or quality materials for that matter. So when I go to Lowe's or Home Depot, yeah, the shelves are packed full of lumber. It's all there. I don't know exactly how all that stuff is sourced, so I can't speak to it. But some of the builders have frozen orders on new builds, anticipating perhaps that it's going to get so expensive that, what happens when you buy a house and it's essentially a $300,000 house? You build a $300,000 house, but that house costs $400,000. You're going to take 10 plus years to even recover that cost. You're going to be so far upside down in that house. You don't ever want to be like that in a house simply because the lumber was so expensive or the labor was so expensive. But my fear with all of this is that then we slow down building. We're not going to build houses around here, at least, and maybe other places they continue. We're not selling cars right now. So when you go to a car dealership, locally at least, Toyota always has tons of cars on their lot. There's not a car on the lot. A couple of Camrys, a couple of Highlanders. Nothing else is there. So you've put some of the car salesmen out of work. You've got manufacturing halted at car manufacturing plants. So in Kentucky near my house, there is the Kentucky Speedway, which is now housing thousands, maybe tens of thousands of Ford Super Duties. They've just parked them all around. You can look it up on the internet and it'll show you satellite photos of just thousands, tens of thousands of Ford Super Duties, the 250s, just parked there because they don't have chips. So they're ready to go. They're built. They just don't have a chip in them. And so they've halted production because the Motor Speedway in Kentucky is massive. It's a massive place. It's like an amusement park. Imagine filling that whole place up with trucks. You can't ship them anywhere. So my fear with all of this is that it's going to create some problems that are obvious problems that are going to be putting people out of work, which is going to spur potentially another recession. It's going to people are going to have money in their pockets, and it's going to take away some production. You take away the worker in America, let's call it the blue collar American. You take away their job because they can't produce anything. Well, production stops, manufacturing stops. Then those of us who are in shipping, those of us who are in logistics, those are us who are in commercial real estate. I don't know what the implications are for the rest of us when you take away people's ability to spend. So that's a little bit frustrating. I see in the car and the chip front, I see that some of these manufacturers are trying to bring some of this production to America, or they're expanding it to Japan and Taiwan and other places because a lot of it was in China, and it was sitting there kind of not being. I don't know. It's just they can't keep up or whatever. But hopefully we get it taken care of, and it solves the problem around lumber, solves the problem around chips and vehicles, et cetera, puts people back to work.
Yeah, the bit of research I've done on it, there is the Taiwan Semiconductor Company is actually backed by the government of Taiwan. It sounds like they're going to really start looking at ways to bump up their process, because this is something the U.S. government has actually kind of started to look at themselves as to, A, why, and B, how do we fix this when it comes to the microchip processors and things of that nature. So, just something to keep an eye on out there, individuals. That's for sure. And
right.
I had never heard about this Ford surplus. I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah, Google Kentucky Motor Speedway Ford Super Duties. It's interesting. It's again, the motor speedway is a big place, and there are
Yes.
tons of trucks parked there.
Yeah. Well, Matt, let's get on to some of these other topics. We discussed a little bit about last night. Let's talk about this skills translator. You know, what what is it?
Yeah, so Skills Translator, these are things that have been around for a number of years now. Skills Translator, really, its job, its idea is that if I'm coming out of the military, and let's use ourselves, because I've used these before too. Combat engineer. If I were to enter 1371 which is my MOS code, into a Skills Translator, what it should do is kick me back some results about jobs that might translate to what my role was in the military in the civilian world. So it'll tell me, hey, you were a combat engineer in the Marines. Well, you could go do this job and that job. And I've seen less and less companies investing in these types of things lately for a number of reasons. And this is where really the conversation goes. The idea here is that you are able to check into a skills translator and it'll tell you what jobs you should be pursuing. The problem with these things is that in a lot of cases, if you search into a skills translator that a company is hosting, they might not have a job that specifically lines up to whatever your occupational specialty is. So for example, in 0311 in the Marine Corps as infantry, well, there's no such job as infantry inside of my company, for example. So if I go in there and type in 0311, it doesn't kick back any results. I'm going to be one awfully frustrated job-seeking veteran at this point. The other thing is that some of these could be used for employers to take a resume. They could take a candidate who's leaving the military at 0311 and say, all right, well, let me see, let me understand a little bit more. I don't know about the military, so I don't understand what you did in the military. So I'm going to type this in. I'm just going to show me infantry rifleman. And this infantry rifleman is really good at kicking doors down and shooting guns. Well, now I'm frightened as a civilian employer. I don't know what to do with that person. So I'm not going to do anything with you. It's one of these processes where it's great if you are trying to learn a basic job. You're trying to understand a little bit more about what you could do post-military. But when I punch in 1371 in a lot of these combat engineer, it tells me I should be a bricklayer. What if I don't want to be a bricklayer? And this goes into a whole other conversation about what careerism after the military looks like. So skills translators are a great tool if you aim to use them, if you really want to stay in the same field of what you've done in the military. But a lot of people I hear and I speak with, a lot of people don't want to do the same job in the military. So I think the idea here is that around a skills translator, you don't want to lean into it 100% and jump in and say, hey, this thing, I'm a whatever job in the military. This thing told me I should go do grass mowing. It's not always official. Now we'll say ONET, an organization called ONET. You can just search ONET on the internet. ONET does a little bit better job of you're able to enter some different statistics. So your occupational specialty, maybe your rank, and things like that. So as a combat engineer, when I left the Marine Corps, I was a sergeant. Well, being a sergeant in a combat engineer field, as we all know, people in the military have 2 or 3 different jobs in some cases. That allows me to now go in there and say, okay, well, if I'm building my own resume, how am I selling myself to other people? How am I selling myself to companies? I'm a sergeant in the Marine Corps. I was a 1371. I was a combat engineer. So yeah, I did explosives and I did some construction stuff. But by the way, I was also planning operations and training. I was leading troops. So I was a small team supervisor, et cetera, et cetera. So skills translators for the civilian hiring manager they are not all inclusive. They're not necessarily even a good tool for you. For the transitioning service member, these are systems that were designed by computer algorithms. It's taking the basic skills of your occupational specialty and it's spitting you back some things that match those keywords. It's not necessarily your definitive guide to how to transition out of the military, what job to do thereafter.
Well, I think the takeaway should be that it'll point you in an area of expertise potentially.
Right.
So if you're a motor T operator, you plug in your MOS code, it's probably going to spit back something along the lines of delivery driver, truck driver, things of that nature. I would say those individuals, logistics companies, trucking companies, a place like Cintas where you used to work, being those sort of delivery drivers, things of that nature could potentially be things that meet that skill set. But those are just kind of areas of expertise. Logistics companies don't just have truck drivers. Cintas doesn't just have delivery route drivers. It could be an area where you have an understanding of how this all should work. You'd be able to, I don't want to drive anymore. I could go to Cintas and be a salesperson.
Right.
But when it comes to those delivery route drivers, hey man, I've been in your seat before. Maybe not delivering, safety equipment and clean uniforms and things of that nature, but I was delivering beans and bullets back in the military.
Right.
So I've sat in those seats. For us, you plug in 1371, says bricklayer. That's fine. I don't want to lay bricks. That's tough work out in the sun all summer, getting dirty, getting sunburnt. Maybe I don't want to be the bricklayer, but hey, small teams, leadership and organization, small logistics type things, planning out the day, strategy, communication. You get new guys into your unit. There's only so much they actually picked up at their MOS school. So there's a lot of the on the job type training. So you're teaching classes like, hey, you might have heard about the Bangalore torpedo. Let's say we run out. How do you make one? Let's go over the field expedient Bangalores. Let's, all those sort of things. So you're doing, public speaking, things like that. You could go to that brick company and say, hey, I have a little bit of expertise in this field from my MOS in the military. I'm more looking to possibly be like a project manager or I'd like to be a purchaser for the company.
Right.
It's not an end all be all. I went to a vocational high school to do electrical work. I thought I was going to grow up and be an electrician. It's a skill that I enjoy having most of the time until people find out I have it. And then they're like, hey, come on over. I need these lights put up in my attic and it's 175 degrees up there and I haven't cleaned it in 25 years.
Yeah.
But once I got out of the military, I was like, well, I could go back into the construction field, or I found an electrical supply company and actually got a job selling those same products. And, the skills I learned back in high school, using these products, I could be on a job site, talking to these contractors and say, hey, I see where you're at in this project. I've been on these sites before. I've been in this stage. Looks like you guys are going to, get into doing this. You're done your rough out. So now we're going to get into, the actual devices. You need receptacles, you need switches, you need the actual light fixtures. Why don't we go ahead and get that kind of stuff on order? And they're like, man, you're on top of it. Absolutely. Because I've been here myself.
Yeah.
Somebody brings me an oddball part and I'm like, oh, I don't 100% know what this is, but I've seen similar things. Let me take this back with me and I can find this out. Those sort of things help. So yeah, putting your MOS into one of these skills translators might not point you at the very specific job. It's going to give you that field though. It's going to,
right. And that's the idea here, is that it's telling you, it's taking, if you look at your job description from the military, again, as a combat engineer, if I go to the Marine Corps website right now and look up the job description for a combat engineer, it might be a couple of bullets or whatever. That's all that skills translator is doing. Yeah. It's taking a few bullets out of that job description. It's saying, oh, you were a combat engineer, so you probably did construction, explosives, maybe some other, it's taking the tangible items. It's not taking the leadership, the planning, and all of the other things. I had to work with a budget, or I had to work with, chemical equipment and stuff like that. I had to work with heavy equipment, et cetera. It might not even take any of that into account. Now, if you're trying to stay in that field, if you're like, hey, I'm coming out of the military, I really like electrical work, and I was an electrician's mate in the Navy, for example, and I need to go find a job right now, then yes, absolutely use that. It's going to say, oh, you're an electrician's mate in the Navy? Well, here, go find an electrician job, or go work for a power company, go work for, in commercial real estate, we're hiring people with electrical backgrounds all day. We got to manage and maintain big buildings. Yeah. So these are opportunities. I think that the biggest disconnect is a lot of people who are leaving the armed forces and don't necessarily want to do the same thing. Or when you take that person who has become a generalist, the person who has done 20 plus years as an enlisted soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, and that person has so many broad experiences that now they're like, well, my initial occupational specialty was infantry, but I haven't done infantry things for 20 years, for 15 years. That person is going to have a really hard time plugging in infantry to a skills translator. It's not going to tell them anything about themselves. It's not going to give them any ideas necessarily. And I think that this is a whole other conversation. It's a hard disconnect when you have not had exposure to corporate America. You don't necessarily see where your classmates, let's say if you went to college instead of military, for example, you're going to see your classmates, your friends that you went to high school with, you went to college with. You're going to look at their jobs and their career paths. You're going to have advice from professors. You're going to have exposure to this kind of thing. You're going to figure out where your jobs are going to be. Unfortunately, in the military, you don't necessarily have that exposure all the time. Mm-hmm. And so when you're coming out, you're trying to figure out, well, I was infantry. Does that mean I have to be a cop or a security guard? Well, absolutely not. What you're going to have to do is, and this is the advice that I give to everybody, aside from networking, you're going to have to look at a job description and write your resume to look like that job description without lying, without fudging. This is common advice. This is a thing that I say every time I talk to a group of people. Take that job description. If you're going to look at the project manager job at company ABC, go in there. Don't do the skills translator. Don't do any of that stuff. You're going in there, and really what you're looking at is does this job description, is it asking for things that I have? And you might have 90% of it. That's the other thing to bear in mind. You don't always have to have 110% of what the job description is asking for. You might have 90%. Let's formulate our resume to look like what that job description is asking for. Because ultimately what happens is there's truth in the idea that recruiters and hiring managers give a resume about 8 to 16 seconds. They look at it. They look at the top quarter of the page. They skim through it. If I am hiring a project manager and your resume says that you've been serving ice cream for the last 15 years, I'm not going any further in your resume. If I'm hiring a project manager and one of the first bullet points on there is that you have a PMP and that you've been leading projects in high capacity, zero fail environments in the military, that's going to be very appealing to me. I'm going to continue to look. And so that's where the skills translators don't necessarily do us any justice in some cases. And what we have to do is be able to take our experiences and match them up to what a job description is asking for and plug into it. That's how we plug into it.
Would you say the soft skills are honestly more important? And I think it might be kind of odd saying soft skills along with the military, but there are soft skills learned in the military. That small group leadership, that public speaking aspect of things is really what corporate America is more focused. Hey, you were an 0311. You were a basic Marine Corps infantryman, a rifleman. Most likely, you're not finding a job that has anything to do with being a Marine Corps rifleman. Right. I can't, off the top of my head, think of anything other than maybe like a weapons instructor or something. And there's very few of those jobs. So you're going into a corporate setting. Most likely, none of your military skills are going to translate to that corporate job, but the soft skills also learned with your time in the armed forces. The leadership, the public speaking, things of that nature. Those are the things that is going to possibly get you those extra couple seconds on those recruiters' eyes. So you can, definitely put your military experience on your resume. It shows that you have the ability to, put your foot down, push through, work through hard tasks. You're a goal setter and you achieve those goals, but you want to highlight those things that you learned beyond the military skills again that are actually going to translate to corporate America. Yep.
Yeah. The soft skills, the public speaking, et cetera, those are great. And you can put those on your resume because in a lot of cases, especially for sales jobs and public facing jobs, they want that type of stuff. And I know that in my own career path, in my own interviews, I have had a lot of military resumes come through, and then I jump on the phone with somebody who is transitioning out of the military, and the conversation becomes very dry and awkward very quickly, unfortunately, because they're not used to selling themselves, or they're not used to having a conversation and really projecting their personality. And I say this because I know some people roll their eyes. They're like, oh, I don't want to show you my personality. I don't, that doesn't matter. My skills are what speaks for themselves. I'm like, that's great. what's going to happen is, especially if you're going for if you're going for a job that doesn't have to interact with people, fine. Your personality doesn't matter. Your hard skills are really what get you in the door. But at some point in time, more and more companies, and I've seen this in my own career, more and more companies are even going with those jobs that are not traditionally people-facing jobs, but they need the person in that role to be a steward of customer service, to be a representative of the business, and thusly the personality and the customer service and the public speaking, then it does come in. Then the guy who is turning wrenches in the distribution center suddenly does have to be able to turn around and talk to his client or talk to somebody else and not fumble the conversation. So the other piece of this is, yes, it's valuable to put on a resume, but I would talk about those things in an interview. If you end up getting on the phone with somebody, that's where your personality and your ability to adapt to a conversation and the ability to sell yourself really comes in. And I think a lot of people, I did the same thing when I was coming out of the Marines. A lot of people don't really know how to put themselves on a little bit of a pedestal and say, here's what I can offer you. And so my first handful of interviews, I was dry, I was stiff. I distinctly remember going into an interview. I got an interview at an investment firm. They wanted to hire me as an intern. And this could have been a life-changing internship. This was a major investment firm. I went in and sat down at the other end of the table, and this person asked me a bunch of questions, and I was like, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, sir, no, sir. They asked me, like, why do you want to be here? And I honestly couldn't answer the question because I hadn't put any thought into it. And of course, they didn't invite me back. But I distinctly remember that, like, well, why wouldn't they want to bring me on? I have this amazing resume, and I've blown things up in shotguns, and this is cool. They didn't care about any of that. It didn't matter to them. They don't care about that. What they wanted was somebody who could come in the door and largely make an impact, and maybe deal with some clients, deal with some people in the office who are investment bankers and things like that. But I'm sitting there dry. I'm sitting there stiff and rigid. I have nothing to say beyond yes, sir, no, sir. And so they didn't offer me an interview back. So that's where, this goes back to the conversation, beyond skills translators. It's being able to sell yourself. It's being able to take yourself and say, here's what I can offer the business. Here's what I can do for you. At the end of the day, and I think this is another thing a lot of people in the military don't quite fathom while they're in, because the military does not operate this way. Companies pay you based on what you can produce. Companies pay you based on what you produce. And that's, in short, if you're a salesperson and you're selling $1 million worth of stuff every year, you might get $100,000 a year salary. If you're selling $10 million worth of stuff, you might get $200,000, $300,000 worth of pay. If you come into a company and you're not producing anything, you're not going to get a paycheck. If you are getting interviewed for a business and they're like, hey, why would I hire you over the next guy? And you can't answer that question, they're going to go hire the next guy because he had an answer to that question. So at the end of the day, companies are not just hiring people to put bodies, unless you're the guy at the airport who is literally making sure that people don't go the wrong way out of the exit. That guy got hired to stand there and make sure nobody's going the wrong way out of the exit. Essentially, that person's a security professional. But there are largely not many jobs where you're just kind of sitting there not doing anything. So you're being paid to produce a service or to produce revenue in a lot of cases. And if you can't explain to them what you can produce, you're not going to be the top fit. You're not going to be the obvious choice.
Yeah. I know that it's come up on this podcast before. In sales, it's what can you produce. In management, it's what problems can you solve. And essentially that's a production itself. It's, guess what? There's going to be daily problems. There's going to be weekly problems, monthly problems, quarterly problems. We need somebody that can help solve these problems. And if you're that individual that can help solve these problems, point these sales in, hey, man, I got a client I just can't get in the door with. You got any tips for me? This manager, hey, your next sales call, I'm going to go out there with you. We'll see what kind of headway we can get. And you can help solve those problems. You can also get paid off the problems you can solve. But yeah, finding your value, I think is something I know I struggled with, for a long time. It's, and I think that was just me. I didn't, I'm just average Joe in here doing my job. I'll come in, I'll do the best job I can possibly do. And but the more opportunities I was given, and the more I began to see, hey man, every time they give me something, maybe not right away, but given time, I begin to pick these things up and I begin to succeed and win. and I'm able to then pass those skills on to the next. And hey, listen, this is
Right.
what I've learned from this. Give this a shot. And I see them to start to succeed and win. I'm not the only one seeing this. The other
Right.
people see it. And when other people start seeing it and you get that feedback, please know that is value. People are starting to see your value. You also need to see that value.
Well, in that case, you are taking your value now to the business becomes your experience is now taking 10 other people to experience level, then 20 other people. It becomes exponential. So now your value is no longer that you are selling widgets or creating widgets. Now you're teaching 10, 20, 30, 150, 200 people how to create widgets, which now makes your worth exponential, which is what you'll get paid to do.
And hopefully they pass it on as well. And you just continue to create.
Right.
So, hey, we have hit that 10 o'clock time. I know, Matt, you have a hard out at 10. You have a call coming up. So we're going to have to cut this conversation short, but this is a good topic. We should probably try to cover this more in depth later on in an upcoming episode. But with all that being said, as always, you can find us on all the major social media platforms. You can check us out on all the major podcast platforms as well. Give us a like, rating, review, subscribe, tell a friend, tell a family member. We'd also love to hear from you if you have a topic or a guest suggestion. So reach out to us anywhere you feel like, and we'll see that and interact a little bit. Appreciate you guys very much for listening. We'll check you out right back here next week on Beyond the Wire.